And the current Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein submitting his resignation today, which will be effective May 11th. Rosenstein, ending a turbulent 2-year term, wrote to President Trump saying, quote, "I am grateful to you for the opportunity to serve, for the courtesy and humor you often display in our personal conversations, and for the goals you set in your inaugural address: patriotism, unity, safety, education, and prosperity." Joining me now, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. Tom, good to see you. You know, it went both ways, this wonderful, effusive language. Attorney General Barr gave him a big thank you letter, a big hug. But you think of everything he did with the Mueller investigation, you wonder whether he deserved it all.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in the letter about discussions about using the 25th Amendment to illicitly remove him or trying to wear a wire in the Oval Office. The discussions there to try to entrap him, and then, as you know, as we discussed, appointing in the same breath that special counsel to harass him for 2 years and allowing all those abuses to take place, targeting Trump and people around him, while at the same time protecting the Clinton-Obama people who are behind the illicit targeting that began in 2016, and certainly protecting Hillary Clinton silence from DOJ on her emails, despite pleas for someone to do something in light of the sham investigation that was proven by the sham investigation of Mueller and Miss Attorney General Lynch.
He was standing over the shoulders of Mueller all the time. I mean, didn't he sign off on those FISA warrants, which used such extraordinary information, such as came from the Trump dossier, stuff that was totally unverifiable, that now has been proven by the Mueller report itself to be not true, but that was used, and he signed off on it being used for those FISA, those spying warrants.
That's right. He signed off on the final warrant application that we know about, the renewal in the middle of 2017 after Mueller was appointed, so obviously that was benefiting Mueller's operation as well. I think Sally Yates, who you talked about, signed off on one of them when she was Deputy Attorney General. Remember, Sally Yates was the Rod Rosenstein of the Obama Justice Department. So, you know, Rod Rosenstein was never questioned on any of this in any substantial way. He resisted oversight from Congress. He thought, like many Justice Department deep staters, that the Justice Department wasn't answerable to much anyone. The Congress, certainly not the President, and certainly not the American people. The DOJ, a stone wall fell down around the DOJ, even worse than under Obama when Rod Rosenstein came to town.
Well, now you have a lot of reports focusing, hopefully like a laser beam, on some of those problems that you just outlined. You've got the John Huber report that's coming in. I guess that's going to focus on FISA, which we were just talking about. You got the Inspector General, Mr. Horowitz, is coming out with his report, and you have the Attorney General with his own investigation. So, of course, Rosenstein was around for Mueller. He won't be around for these. Do you think he might be implicated in any of these?
Well, certainly I do want to know about this coup effort, and Attorney General Barr needs to focus on the role of Mr. Rosenstein in the approval of Mr. Mueller's special counsel operation, despite not only Rosenstein's conflicts, but Mueller's conflicts of interest. And then he was talking about with Andrew McCabe, who was fired for misconduct, wearing a wire on the President of the United States in an Oval Office. Now, there's a dispute as to whether he was, quote, joking or not. But again, why isn't Congress questioning Mr. Rosenstein? And, you know, I just hope it is a new day at the Justice Department, that the veil will be lifted and these documents, as the President seemingly has promised, will begin to be released and declassified. Certainly on these FISA warrant applications, portions of which are still classified, and many believe that the portions that are still hidden show more deep state corruption targeting and abusing President Trump.
Tom, very quickly, I want to make a pivot to Attorney General Barr and the request so far to have him appear in front of Jerry Nadler's committee. Do you think he'll be a no-show?
I think he will show up because the Democrats will back down from having their lawyers question him. It's pretty clear they're afraid of him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to rely on counsel to ask the Attorney General. Look, Attorney General Barr blew the Mueller report out of the water in terms of its, I think, what it was designed to do, which was to smear Trump. He saw right through that and said, nope, no collusion. Oh, you want to play games on obstruction? I'll tell you the story on obstruction. The facts and the evidence and the law don't justify any obstruction charges here. And then, of course, he blew the lid off of the Spygate scandal by acknowledging spying took place targeting President Trump's campaign. So no wonder the Democrats don't want to question him directly. They want to use lawyers. I'm not afraid of lawyers questioning witnesses, as some seem to suggest. But it's I think very interesting that after years of questioning, why do they let the members question the witnesses? Why don't they just have competent lawyers do it? The Democrats decided to do it for the first time with Attorney General Barr.
They are, I think you put your finger on it, though. They're afraid of him. I mean, the guy knows his way around Washington bureaucrats and Washington politicians like nobody else. Tom, great to see you. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, right here in studio. I'm looking at him. Hello there, Tom.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you. All right, so Bill Barr off to speak to the Senate Judiciary Committee today. He's going to be testifying there about the Mueller report and everything that's been discovered. Ahead of that, some leakers attempting to salt the earth, though, to try and destroy Bill Barr's opportunity to testify with a clean slate, because there's these headlines coming out of both the Washington Post and the New York Times that Bob Mueller was very grumpy with Bill Barr after he released his initial 4-page letter indicating the top-line findings of the Mueller report. What do you make of the latest scandal to envelop all of this in the last 10 hours or so?
Well, it's a non-scandal because obviously the report's out, so we can judge whether Mr. Barr accurately portrayed it in that initial disclosure where he said there's no collusion, which of course is what the report found. And he also said Mueller didn't exonerate the president of obstruction, but I found there was no obstruction as a matter of law and fact. That was the bottom line. Now, I think what the Mueller operation wanted to do, or was hoping to do, was to drop this 448-page distraction from those underlying issues onto the public. And Barr saw right through that and said, no, we're going to get these conclusions out quickly so people have the core questions answered. And so they didn't like the fact that the story about the Mueller report is no collusion, no obstruction. Mm-hmm. And that letter, which I think was probably written by the Andrew Weissmans, the nasty anti-Trumpers on Mueller's staff, Mueller signed off on, was written. And it just shows you the corrupt arrogance of the Mueller special counsel operation, that they would think they get the right a letter to the Attorney General of the United States complaining about the media context of work they were hired to do. And this, again, proves why there shouldn't have been a Mueller report, because it was always a political tool to attack the president. It didn't work out well for them, and that's why they're angry at Mueller. That's why they're angry at Barr.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't this play into this Washington Post story and this leaking of this letter? Doesn't this just play into Trump obstructed, Barr's trying to hide it, and that's the narrative that we just keep hearing over and over, and the left is convinced, and the media carries their water for them, that that's what came out of the Mueller report. And this is why we need to continue to subpoena and investigate through 2020.
I think that's a fair analysis of why they're pushing this out. I would suspect the Justice Department actually leaked this to get it out before it was brought up at the hearing, so they got ahead of it.
Really?
But who knows? The problem they have is they think that the obstruction charge, you can build an obstruction charge because the president was acting as president and expressing concern about something his Justice Department was doing and taking steps to provide oversight. That's at heart what you see in this obstruction report. And when you see Mueller really writing a bunch of gossip in hundreds of pages about what the president was doing, you could see someone like Attorney General Barr saying, well, that doesn't amount to a hill of beans prosecution-wise, and we're not doing it. And, my concern is that the Justice Department has put itself through Mueller, and, Barr semi-endorsed it by allowing the report to be published as the arbiter of what the president can do as president.
Right.
And that's really an assault on our system.
It's interesting to me. I thought Mueller's task was to figure out what prosecutable crimes happened, and that was it. That's the extent of it, right? Because the way this letter seems to be framed, not only by the press, but in terms of the actual quotes we get from Mueller to Bill Barr, it's almost like he was more concerned with the spin. Like, what's the public relations campaign on this going to be like? Mueller shouldn't even be troubling himself with that nonsense. He was appointed with working for the Justice Department to look for crimes and then recommend prosecutions on that basis, no?
Yeah, they were hoping for a smear job. It didn't work out for them. They were angry. They wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the United States. And Barr called up Mueller and said, what's going on here? And Mueller's like, well, nothing's going on here. And, to show you that it's not about what Mueller says, you have now the Democrats in the House trying to refer one of the witnesses in the report for prosecution. Well, Mueller had that information and didn't recommend a prosecution. Right. So they're just grasping at straws at this point. But it's a distraction to the president. Look, we've got this crisis in Venezuela.
Yep.
And we get the Justice Department machinations once again being front and center as the president's trying to run the country. Now, I don't believe the president's immune from scrutiny because we, quote, want him to run the country. But the idea that the Justice Department gets to harass the president incessantly through this game of gossip and innuendo, to me, is a problem constitutionally.
Yeah, but what you're suggesting is that when you say Justice Department, Bill Barr runs the Justice Department. Did this, in your theory here, did Bill Barr certify a leak like this intentionally to keep himself in the news or something?
No, I think it was going to come out today. This letter was not going to remain secret.
Okay.
It was going to have to come out. But I don't know who leaked it, but it was going to come out.
When you listen to radio advertisements, or I should say, I hear them on the radio, maybe you do as well, and you may see them on television. They have sometimes advertisements for financial investments and products of that nature. And usually at the end of the advertisement, they say past performance, and they have the narrator or the advertiser quickly, past performance is no indication of future results. Well, actually, that's probably obviously a good caution if you're deciding whether to invest in an investment. But it's a pretty good rule of thumb for politics. Past performance is an indication of future results. And that's why the swamp and the deep state hate President Trump, because he breaks that rule. He ain't your ordinary politician. He, believe it or not, he thinks he's president and should exercise his authority there as such. And he should fire, and he thinks, well, I can fire the FBI director because he's corrupt. And they're outraged that he did that because that rule of thumb isn't working for them anymore. They don't know what he's going to do. And they pretend because he does things differently than prior presidents, it's corrupt, as opposed to maybe just getting back to the basics of the presidency, where the president runs things as opposed to the administrative state. And let me be clear, I think the president should be even doing more. But the fact that he's doing just this little bit more in terms of trying to drain the swamp is just causing outrage. And they're willing to try to put him in jail over it, folks. So I don't know what Attorney General Barr is going to do. I think he deserves an A+ for his handling of the Mueller report, because certainly you can see he really blew up the scheme, it seems to me, the Democrats and the Mueller partisans had in terms of going after President Trump, because I think their view was they were going to release this 448-page report, which I told you don't have to read because it's a scam, but you can read it if you want to prove. If you don't believe me, read it. The first part shows no collusion. The second part shows no obstruction. And that's the report. So Mueller gets this report. He sees 448 pages. I know what's going on here. You're just trying to paper the record, Mueller special counsel. You're, even though exonerating the president fundamentally on collusion, while refusing to acknowledge he didn't obstruct, you put a bunch of material in there to suggest that he did. I'm not going to let that go out until I review it fully, and I'm going to get out the basic conclusions. No collusion. Oh yeah, you don't want to come up with you're going to suggest he committed obstruction? No. No obstruction. I'm Attorney General. I'll decide whether there'll be a prosecution there. No obstruction. And so the left was furious because it was 10 days of the truth out of the Justice Department. So I'm hoping he follows that A-plus performance with significant prosecutions of those who broke the law on Spygate. But we're not going to rely on that, because I still believe in that rule of thumb. We're not going to wait for the Justice Department. I mean, if we waited for the Justice Department to do anything, we wouldn't know anything. We wouldn't know about FISA-gate. We wouldn't know about Spygate. We wouldn't know about the Clinton emails. Judicial Watch provided that. We wouldn't know about the IRS scandal, the Benghazi scandal. Fast and furious. The Justice Department has been the center of the storm in virtually every major political scandal in recent memory. Why would we rely on that agency? Attorney General Barr performed a significant public service in when he received the report. He saw what the Mueller special counsel team was up to. They had created this massive report, in many ways designed to distract from the truth that there was no collusion and that they couldn't make an obstruction case. So my guess is they were thinking they were going to get that massive report out into the public domain and distract from those truths. And Mueller and Barr saw through that, and he immediately announced no collusion. Oh, and you think you're going to smear the president on obstruction? I find no obstruction here as a matter of law and fact. So for 10 days we had that massive educational effort by Barr telling the American people no collusion. So the report shows there was no collusion, and it shows why there shouldn't have been a Mueller report, because it's 448 pages of really gossip and innuendo designed to make the president look bad. The first part of the report is about collusion, and there is no collusion. They describe in great, minute detail really uninteresting and unimportant and unsubstantial communications between the Russians and Trump associates or Trump world people that don't amount to a hill of beans. But on the core issue, was there collusion between Trump and the Russians to interfere in our election? They found no evidence. And that could have been said in a page or two, but instead they took 200 pages, which is to imply that there's smoke despite them knowing, I think for a long time, there's no fire. Now part two is the so-called obstruction part. And there Mueller smeared the president by suggesting he may have obstructed justice because they couldn't exonerate him. Well, there's no evidence he obstructed justice. There's evidence he complained, rightly so, about Jeff Sessions. There's evidence he complained about the abuses of the Mueller investigation. And Mueller suggests that the president, exercising his constitutional authority to hire and fire personnel and manage the Justice Department and the FBI could constitute obstruction of justice. So, you know, the deep state DOJ, the anti-Trumpers in the Mueller operation thinks that the president being president could constitute a crime, which of course is absurd. Now, if you've been following our feed here on YouTube and elsewhere, you've known I've always opposed the creation of a Mueller report. We already had one shady dossier targeting President Trump, and we didn't need this corruptly formed investigation coming up with more smears based on what? I don't know. I didn't know at the time, but now I know it's not based on much, targeting President Trump. So the report is targeted, has at least two volumes. It's two volumes, volume 1 and 2. The first part is talks about Russia collusion. The second part is the Gossip Girl part, which talks about the obstruction allegations against the president. Now, the big news is obviously the fundamental basis of the Russia appointment of Robert Mueller is that they investigate the possibility of Russia collusion. And he found no evidence to establish that the Trump campaign colluded with or coordinated with the Russians in any interference efforts. So why do you ask? Are there, let's see how many pages there are in part 1. It's nearly 200 pages. Why does it take him 200 pages to get to that conclusion? Because he wanted to paper the record with allegations that suggest collusion, while, again, fundamentally exonerating the president of any collusion. And it's full of detail about insubstantial, immaterial, and in many ways appropriate, in the case of Michael Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador, or legal contacts between Trump world and the Russians. Now, there's no there. Of course, they've known that from the beginning. And that's one of the scandals of this report. As Mr. Barr said at his press conference this week, no American, certainly no one in the Trump campaign, knowingly colluded with the Russians to try to sway our elections, interfere with our elections, or hack these Democrats, as has been alleged by Mueller. So when did they know there was no collusion? In February 2018, Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said the same thing to the American people when announcing indictments filed by the Mueller team against Russians for improper interference in our election campaigns. So they've known since at least February of last year. But I would go back before the Mueller appointment, because you have that infamous text message exchange between anti-Trumpers Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, where they kind of talk to each other and they're kind of say, well, you know, there's no there. And Strzok wasn't sure whether he was going to join the Mueller team because he knew there was nothing to be found. But he thought it might lead to impeachment, so they thought it might be a good career path for him. Outrageous. So they've known there's no collusion. So what has happened? They kept this investigation going for well over a year extra to try to ensnare the president in, as I said, this fake obstruction crime. So the second part of the report is particularly outrageous because it's full of outrageous innuendo, one-sided depictions of events that suggests the president obstructed justice. But of course, Mueller said, well, I can't conclude because of questions of fact or law, one way or another, where he obstructed justice. And here's the really outrageous conclusion here. I'll get to it here. I had it all teed up before it began, but now I lost the page. Because we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment, which is the thing that Mueller was hired to do, we did not draw ultimate conclusions about the president's conduct. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. And those difficult issues, he says earlier, are of law and of fact, meaning the law may not be on his side and the facts may not be on his side. At the same time, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it does not exonerate him. That is an outrageous smear. It's not the job of the special prosecutor to, quote, exonerate the president. He either prosecutes or he doesn't. And rather than admit he doesn't have the evidence to justify a prosecution, he suggests that it is there. And he wants to have his cake and eat it too, exonerate the president. Who exonerates the president? Not a special prosecutor. Another abuse of power by Mueller in this report. This is why it should never have been created. You have over 200 pages of Mueller criticizing implicitly the president's conduct as president over his administration of the Justice Department and the FBI. And the theory of Mueller is the president didn't like Sessions being recused, disagreed with his policy decision there, thought it was outrageous that Comey was targeting him or suggesting he was being personally targeted when in fact it was not happening. And that perception was impairing his ability to govern the nation. And he was outraged that Mueller was appointed and complained about the various abuses of Mr. Mueller. And Mueller suggesting his concerns in his efforts to try to rein in the Justice Department, some of which he was able to accomplish by firing Comey, then firing Sessions. He suggests obstruction of justice. The president being president, under Mueller's theory of the law, it could mean he's obstructing justice. Hiring and firing decisions. Expressing concerns about the Justice Department and the FBI acting inappropriately. Criticizing Mueller publicly. So what's in here is a lot of innuendo, but what isn't in here is an admission that the president had something to be concerned about Mueller's misconduct, about the way he was appointed. Remember, he was appointed because James Comey, a witness who's used against the president here, stole documents, leaked them to the New York Times, and the documents he stole were FBI files on President Trump that he created after the fact. Meeting notes he supposedly took after the fact, or memos. So he stole those records, leaked them inappropriately, illegally to the New York Times with the specific hopes of getting a special counsel appointed. And it happened. And the president was upset by that. He had every right to be. The special counsel suggests firing the special counsel could be obstruction of justice. The president has every right to fire a Justice Department employee, especially when they're abusing their power. The special counsel suggests that the president's concern about the way Manafort was treated was obstruction of justice. No acknowledgement that the president had reason to be concerned with that over-the-top, guns-drawn raid early in the morning. I would love to see, by the way, a Mueller report of how the Obama White House handled the Clinton email issue. Just like we have a Mueller report on how the Trump White House handled Mueller and Sessions and Comey and all of that craziness. It's amazing how President Obama is immune from all this. And he ought to be subject to investigation. It's talking about getting back to the Mueller report aftermath. Barack Obama needs to be investigated. Joe Biden needs to be investigated. Susan Rice needs to be investigated. James Comey, Sally Yates. I'll go through the list again. It bears repeating. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe, John Kerry, John Brennan, James Clapper. Bruce Orr, obviously. The DNC, Fusion GPS. You know, I read Glenn Simpson's testimony. Glenn Simpson testified, I think, to both the House and the Senate. I read it last year, so I'm going on memory. And he was asked, Glenn Simpson runs Fusion GPS. He was the vendor that created the dossier for Hillary Clinton and the DNC. He was asked what he told the people who hired him, Hillary Clinton and people like that. And he took a privilege. I don't know what the privilege is, but they never got the answer. So is Hillary Clinton going to ever be questioned on the dossier? I love the fact that the media is once again paying attention in the aftermath of the Mueller report to the New York Times had a story the other day. Well, maybe the dossier was Russia disinformation designed to make President Trump look bad and disrupt U.S. elections. Whoa! That's what Judicial Watch has been saying for 2-3 years. It was rather obvious when you look at the dossier that it was Russia misinformation. The Russia intelligence services obviously came up with something and laundered it through Christopher Steele, who had willing accomplices in the FBI and the DOJ to use it as a pretext to target Trump. And rather than protect President Trump or then candidate Trump from that Russia effort to try to destroy him, President Obama allowed his DOJ and FBI to use it to spy on him. That's the scandal of our generation, folks. That's the collusion that needs to be investigated. And the fact that Mueller pretended that wasn't an issue shows you the corruption of the Mueller special counsel operation. I've long said there should be no Mueller report. We need an investigation, not only of the investigators going back to the inception of the investigation or the Spygate effort, we need an investigation of the Mueller special counsel operation. That they avoided investigating the obvious, which was the dossier as set up by the Russians to get at Trump, and did they have willing accomplices with Hillary Clinton and such. They spent a lot of time talking about Donald Trump Jr. having a meeting with someone who purportedly represented the Russians, although they were actually working with Fusion GPS and Hillary Clinton, about using information from Russia against Hillary Clinton. But they were completely uninterested by the fact and ignored it that Hillary Clinton admitted. Because Christopher Steele, who created the dossier for her, said he used Russian intelligence sources. And they had no problem with that. And that double standard isn't just an omission, it's purposeful and corrupt. So Mueller needs to be investigated as well, and his team.